I never thought I would stand in front of 200 people at an industry awards ceremony, holding a crystal trophy in my hands, and feel nothing but cold dread running through my veins. You would think that winning Entrepreneur of the Year would be one of the happiest moments of my life, and in some ways, it was. But as I looked out into that sea of applauding faces, my eyes found her, Rachel, sitting 3 tables back, her champagne glass frozen halfway to her lips, her smile so tight I could see the tension in her jaw from across the room. And in that moment, I knew that everything I had built, everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed was about to become a battlefield. Because Rachel Bennett, my best friend since we were 11 years old, the girl who knew my deepest secrets, my biggest fears, and my wildest dreams, had already declared war. I just hadn't realized it yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand what we were before you can truly comprehend what she became. Rachel and I met on the first day of secondary school in Manchester. I was a scrawny kid with secondhand uniforms and a chip on my shoulder the size of a boulder. My mom worked 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads after my dad left, and I learned early that nothing in this world was going to be handed to me. Rachel was different. Her family lived in one of those big Victorian houses on the nice side of town. Her dad was a solicitor, her mom stayed home and organized charity events, and Rachel never had to wonder whether there would be food on the table or heating in the winter. We shouldn't have been friends. We had nothing in common. But on that first day, when a group of older kids started mocking my tatty school bag, Rachel walked right up to them and told them to shove off. Just like that. This blonde, perfectly put-together girl with the expensive shoes and the confident smile standing up for someone like me. I was starstruck. From that day forward, we were inseparable. Rachel became my person, my confidant, my sister by choice. We spent every weekend at each other's houses, though we both preferred her place because there was always something to eat and her bedroom was warm. We would stay up until 3 in the morning talking about everything, our futures, boys we liked, teachers we hated, dreams that felt too big to say out loud. I told Rachel I wanted to start my own business someday, create something from nothing, prove to everyone who had ever looked down on my family that Sophie Mitchell was going to be somebody. And Rachel would squeeze my hand and tell me she believed in me. She said we would conquer the world together. She said we would always have each other's backs, no matter what. I believed her. For 20 years, I believed every single word. We went to different universities after school. I got into Leeds on a scholarship to study business, scraping by on student loans and part-time jobs at coffee shops and retail stores. Rachel went to Durham, where her parents paid for everything, including a flat rather than halls, because she couldn't possibly share a bathroom with strangers. But we stayed close. We called each other every week, visited when we could afford the train fare, and spent every Christmas and summer holiday joined at the hip. When I graduated with first-class honors despite working 30 hours a week, Rachel was there with flowers and champagne. When Rachel graduated with a respectable 2.1 despite barely attending lectures her final year, I was there cheering louder than anyone else. After university, I moved to London. I had nothing but £300 in my bank account, a suitcase of clothes, and a burning determination to make something of myself. I slept on a friend's couch for 2 months while I applied for jobs, eventually landing an entry-level position at a small marketing agency in Shoreditch. The pay was terrible, the hours were brutal, and I loved every single second of it. I learned everything I could about digital marketing, branding, client relations, and business strategy. I stayed late, came in early, and volunteered for every project nobody else wanted. Within 3 years, I was leading my own team. Within 5, I was their youngest account director. Rachel, meanwhile, floated. Her parents set her up with an internship at a PR firm through one of their connections, but she quit after 6 months because she found it boring. Then she tried working at a gallery, then a boutique hotel, then a lifestyle magazine. Nothing stuck. Nothing satisfied her. I always made excuses for her. Rachel was finding herself, I would say. She had different priorities. Not everyone needed to climb the corporate ladder to be happy. I genuinely believed she was content with her life of leisure, subsidized by her parents' generous allowance. I didn't see the resentment building. I didn't notice the way her compliments started to curdle around the edges, turning from genuine praise to something that tasted almost bitter. When I called to tell her I had been promoted to account director, she said, That's amazing, Soph, but don't you think you're working yourself to death? What's the point of success if you have no life? When I mentioned I was finally able to afford my own flat, she said, "Good for you. I suppose it's fine if you don't mind living in that area." When I showed her the designer handbag I had saved 6 months to buy, she wrinkled her nose and said, "Oh, is that the one from 2 seasons ago? I think Mum has it in her closet somewhere." I excused every single comment. That was just Rachel being Rachel, I told myself. She didn't mean anything by it. She loved me. We were best friends. Things shifted more dramatically when I met Daniel. He was a software engineer I encountered at a conference. And the moment he smiled at me across a crowded room of networking professionals, I felt something click into place. Daniel was different from any man I had ever dated. He was kind without being weak, successful without being arrogant, and he looked at me like I was the most fascinating person he had ever met. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, a simple, perfect moment on a rainy evening in London when he got down on one knee in our kitchen because he said he couldn't wait a single day longer to ask me to be his wife. I called Rachel immediately, tears streaming down my face, barely able to get the words out. There was a pause on the other end of the line, just a beat too long, before she squealed with excitement. "Oh my God, Soph! That's incredible! Let me see the ring!" But when I video called her to show off my engagement ring, I noticed her eyes narrow slightly as she took in the modest but beautiful diamond Daniel had chosen. "It's lovely," she said, her voice flat. "Very you." I told myself I was imagining the dismissiveness in her tone. I told myself she was probably just tired. Rachel was my maid of honor, of course. Who else would it be? She helped me plan the wedding, or at least she said she would help. In reality, she was too busy to come to most of the dress fittings. She accidentally double-booked herself for the cake tasting, and she forgot to organize my hen party until a week before, throwing together a half-hearted dinner at a restaurant she chose because she liked their wine list. I was disappointed, but I made excuses. Rachel had a lot going on. She was dealing with her own stuff. She would show up when it mattered. And she did show up at the wedding. She gave a beautiful speech about our decades of friendship, about how we had grown up together, about how I deserved all the happiness in the world. Guests were crying. My mother was crying. I was crying. It was only later, looking back at the photos, that I noticed Rachel wasn't looking at me during the speech. She was looking at Daniel, and there was something in her expression that I couldn't quite identify. Something cold, something calculating, something hungry. After the wedding, I threw myself into work with renewed energy. Daniel and I bought a small house in North London, and suddenly I felt like I had everything I had ever wanted. A loving husband, a home of my own, a career I was passionate about. But I was growing restless at the marketing agency. I had ideas, big ideas, that my bosses weren't interested in pursuing. I wanted to do something different, something innovative, something that would revolutionize how small businesses approached digital marketing. I started working on my business plan in the evenings, scribbling notes and running numbers and dreaming of possibilities. I told Rachel about my plans over dinner one night. Her parents were between trips, and she was staying in London for a few weeks, so we met at a restaurant in Mayfair that she chose, of course, somewhere that would make a noticeable dent in my wallet. I was buzzing with excitement as I explained my concept for a digital marketing platform that would make professional quality branding accessible to small business owners who couldn't afford traditional agencies. I showed her my research, my projections, my vision. Rachel listened, her chin resting on her hand, her eyes unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment before she spoke. "It's very ambitious, Soph," she said slowly. "But don't you think you're being a bit naive? The market is saturated, and you don't exactly have the connections to make something like this work. Not everyone has what it takes to be an entrepreneur. There's no shame in having a regular job, you know." I felt like I had been slapped. For years, Rachel had been telling me she believed in my dreams. Now, at the moment when I was finally ready to chase them, she was telling me I wasn't good enough. I mumbled something about how I appreciated her honesty, paid my half of the bill, and went home to cry in Daniel's arms. He was furious on my behalf. He told me Rachel was wrong, that my idea was brilliant, that I should ignore anyone who didn't see my potential. I listened to my husband instead of my best friend, and looking back, that was one of the best decisions I ever made. It took 2 years of saving, planning, and preparation, but I finally launched my company, BrightPath Digital. I started small, working from our spare bedroom, taking on clients who couldn't afford anyone else, and treating every single one of them like they were my most important account. Word of mouth spread. My reputation grew. Within 18 months, I had a team of 5 and a proper office space. Within 3 years, we were one of the fastest-growing digital marketing firms in London. I was featured in trade publications, invited to speak at conferences, and approached by investors who saw the potential of what I was building. I kept Rachel updated on every milestone, sending her excited texts and suggesting celebratory dinners. But she became harder and harder to pin down. She was always busy with something vague, something she could never quite explain. When we did manage to meet, she would change the subject whenever I brought up BrightPath, asking about my personal life instead, or talking about her own problems with tedious detail. I noticed she had stopped inviting me to her parents' house, stopped including me in her social events, stopped treating me like her best friend. But I was so caught up in building my company that I didn't dwell on it. I assumed we were just in different life phases. I assumed we would reconnect when things settled down. Then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday evening, about 4 years after I had launched BrightPath. I was at a networking event in central London, the kind of industry gathering where deals were made over champagne and canapes. I had just stepped away from a conversation with a potential investor when I bumped into Claire Whitmore, a girl we had gone to school with. Claire had become a teacher, and though we hadn't been particularly close at school, we had always been friendly. She seemed surprised and pleased to see me, and we chatted for a few minutes about old times and what everyone from our year was up to now. Then Claire's expression shifted, becoming uncertain and slightly uncomfortable. "Sophie," she said slowly, "I need to tell you something, and I'm not sure if I should. It's about Rachel." My stomach dropped. "What about her?" Claire hesitated, glancing around as if worried about being overheard. "A few months ago, I ran into Rachel at a party in Manchester. We had a few drinks, and she started talking about you. And honestly, Sophie, the things she was saying—" Claire trailed off, shaking her head. "She was telling everyone that your company was struggling, that you were barely keeping your head above water, that it was only a matter of time before you failed. She said you had borrowed money from her and hadn't paid it back. She said you had burned through your investors' funds and that there were rumors of fraud. I felt like the ground had dropped out from under me. What? None of that is true. BrightPath is thriving, and I've never borrowed money from Rachel in my life." Claire nodded grimly. I thought it sounded wrong, but she was very convincing. She had all these details, dates and figures and names. I didn't know what to believe, and she wasn't just telling me. She was telling everyone at that party, people from our year, people connected to the Manchester business scene. She was absolutely trashing your reputation. I stood there in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. My best friend since childhood, the woman who had been my maid of honor, the person I had trusted with my deepest secrets, was spreading malicious lies about me. Why? What possible reason could she have to try to destroy everything I had worked so hard to build? "There's more," Claire said reluctantly. "I don't know if this is true, but I heard through a friend of a friend that Rachel has been approaching some of your business contacts, clients, investors, people she somehow found out you were connected to. She's been warning them about you, telling them not to work with you, saying she's trying to save them from making a terrible mistake." I thought back over the past few months, the potential deals that had fallen through unexpectedly, the investor who had suddenly gone cold, the long-term client who had abruptly terminated their contract with no clear explanation. I had chalked it all up to the unpredictable nature of business. But now, a horrible picture was forming in my mind. I thanked Claire for telling me, somehow managing to keep my composure, and excused myself to find a quiet corner of the venue. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and texted Daniel, telling him I needed to come home immediately. Then I stood there, staring at a painting on the wall, trying to understand how the person I loved like a sister could have become my enemy without me even realizing it. That night, I told Daniel everything Claire had revealed. His face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, protectiveness, and finally, the calm, analytical focus that made him so good at his job. "We need evidence," he said firmly. "Before we do anything, we need to know exactly what she's been doing and how much damage she's caused." Over the next few weeks, I became an investigator in my own life. I reached out to the contacts I had lost, asking careful questions about why they had decided not to work with me. Most were evasive, but a few were honest. Yes, they had heard troubling rumors about BrightPath. No, they couldn't remember exactly who had told them, but the details they mentioned, the specific lies about financial impropriety and borrowed money and impending bankruptcy, all matched what Claire had described. I went through my email archives, my social media messages, every digital communication I had ever had with Rachel. I found a pattern I had been too naive to see before. Every time something significant happened in my business, every major win or milestone, there would be a few days of silence from Rachel, followed by an unusually probing conversation where she would ask detailed questions about my clients, my investors, my strategy. I had thought she was finally showing interest in my work. In reality, she had been gathering intelligence. Marcus Hale, my business partner and one of the early investors in BrightPath, noticed the change in me. He was a seasoned entrepreneur who had built and sold 3 companies before semi-retiring, and he had come on board with BrightPath because he believed in my vision. Over lunch one day, he gently asked if everything was all right. I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, before deciding that I needed someone with more experience on my side. I told Marcus everything. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and fixed me with a level gaze. "Sophie," he said carefully, "I need to tell you something. About 6 months ago, I received an email from someone claiming to be a concerned former employee of BrightPath. They made some very serious allegations about you: financial misconduct, unethical business practices, falsified client results." The email was detailed and professional, and honestly, if I didn't know you as well as I do, I might have believed it. My blood ran cold. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew it was nonsense. I did my own investigation quietly and found no evidence to support any of the claims. I assumed it was a competitor trying to destabilize us. But now that you're telling me about your friend—" He shook his head. "Do you still have this person's contact information? Can you find out if she has the technical skills to create a sophisticated disinformation campaign?" I thought about Rachel's failed career attempts, her dabbling in PR and media and hospitality. She knew how to spin a story, she knew how to network, and she had access to enough family money to hire people who could do the things she couldn't. "She doesn't have the skills herself," I said slowly, "but she has the resources to find people who do." Marcus nodded grimly. "Then we need to treat this like any other business threat. We gather evidence, we build a case, and we neutralize her ability to cause further damage. But Sophie, you need to understand something. This person is not your friend. She may never have been your friend, and the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can protect yourself and your company." Those words hit me like a physical blow. Not your friend may never have been your friend. I thought about all the years of confidences, all the shared memories, all the times I had defended Rachel to people who found her cold or superficial or unkind. Had it all been a lie? Had she always harbored this resentment, waiting for the right moment to strike? I spent the next month trying to understand Rachel's motivations. I reached out to mutual acquaintances, being careful not to reveal why I was asking questions, and slowly pieced together a picture I had never seen before. Apparently, Rachel's resentment toward me went back further than I had realized. According to an old school friend, Rachel had always been competitive with me, even when we were teenagers. She hated that I got better grades than her despite having to work part-time. She hated that teachers praised my work ethic and determination. She hated that I got into a top university on merit while she needed her parents' connections to get into her second choice. But what really seemed to have broken something inside her was my success after university. Rachel had always assumed that her privileged background would give her advantages I could never match. She had expected to sail through life while I struggled, always needing her help, always looking up to her. Instead, I had worked my way to the top of my industry while she floundered without purpose. She had watched me buy a home, build a company, and achieve everything she felt entitled to but had never earned. The final straw, apparently, was when I won that Entrepreneur of the Year award. Claire told me that Rachel had been at that ceremony as a guest of one of her parents' friends, and that she had spent the entire evening drinking heavily and making snide comments about me to anyone who would listen. By the time I gave my acceptance speech, she was seething with barely contained fury. That was when she decided to escalate her campaign against me. Armed with this understanding, I started to look at our entire friendship through new eyes. I remembered all the times Rachel had subtly undermined my confidence, telling me I was working too hard, warning me that I was being too ambitious, suggesting that I wasn't really cut out for the life I was building. I remembered how she had tried to talk me out of starting BrightPath, how she had been mysteriously unavailable for my wedding planning, how she had looked at my engagement ring with barely concealed contempt. I had been so desperate for her approval, so grateful for her friendship, that I had excused behavior that should have been unforgivable. But understanding her motivations was only half the battle. I needed to know the full extent of what she had done and find a way to stop her from causing more damage. Daniel threw himself into the investigation with a focus that surprised even me. He used his technical skills to trace the origins of the email Marcus had received, tracking it through layers of proxy servers and anonymous accounts. It took weeks, but eventually he found what he was looking for. The email had been sent from a device registered to a small PR consultancy in Manchester, a firm that specialized in reputation management and crisis communications. A little more digging revealed that this firm had been paid a substantial retainer by a client listed only as R.E.B. Rachel Elizabeth Bennett. I felt sick when Daniel showed me the evidence. It was one thing to suspect that my best friend was trying to destroy me. It was another to see documented proof that she had hired professionals to systematically dismantle my reputation. And the scale of the campaign was more extensive than I had imagined. The consultancy had sent dozens of emails and made countless phone calls on her behalf, spreading carefully crafted lies to clients, investors, journalists, and industry contacts. They had created fake social media accounts to post negative reviews of BrightPath. They had submitted fraudulent complaints to regulatory bodies. They had done everything possible to poison the well, ensuring that anyone who looked into my company would find a trail of damaging, if completely fabricated, information. Marcus was furious when I showed him what we had found. "This is defamation," he said through gritted teeth. "This is tortious interference. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. She hasn't just tried to hurt you, Sophie. She's committed multiple crimes." I knew he was right. I knew I had every legal right to pursue Rachel through the courts and make her pay for what she had done. But part of me still hesitated. Despite everything, despite the mountains of evidence proving her betrayal, I couldn't quite let go of the girl who had stood up for me on my first day of secondary school. I kept hoping there was some explanation, some misunderstanding, some way to make sense of how someone I loved so much could hate me so thoroughly. Daniel saw my hesitation and gently took my hands. "Sophie," he said softly, "I know this is hard. I know you want to believe there's still good in her. But look at what she's done. Look at how long she's been doing it. This isn't a moment of jealousy or a single bad decision. This is a sustained, calculated campaign to destroy everything you've built. She's not going to stop, and if you don't stop her, she will eventually succeed." He was right. I knew he was right. But before I took any action, I needed to understand one more thing. I needed to hear it from Rachel herself. I arranged to meet her for lunch, choosing a quiet restaurant in central London where we wouldn't be overheard. I told her I missed her and wanted to catch up, keeping my voice light and my expression friendly. She agreed immediately, almost eagerly, which told me she had no idea her campaign had been uncovered. She probably thought her anonymous attacks were working, that I was vulnerable and isolated and desperate for her support. When I saw her walk into the restaurant, I had to fight to keep my composure. She looked exactly as she always had. Polished and pretty and perfectly put together. She hugged me like nothing was wrong. like she hadn't been trying to destroy my life for the past year. We ordered drinks, made small talk about her parents and my house and the weather, and then I asked her, in the most casual voice I could manage, how she had been feeling about her career lately. Rachel's expression flickered almost imperceptibly before settling into a practiced smile. "Oh, she said airily, "I've been exploring some options, thinking about what I really want to do with my life. It's hard, finding something that feels meaningful." "I can imagine," I said carefully. "It must be frustrating, watching other people seem to have it all figured out." Something sharp flashed in her eyes, just for a second, before the mask slid back into place. "I suppose, but I've never been the type to compare myself to others. Success looks different for everyone, doesn't it?" I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand answers, to confront her with all the evidence Daniel had gathered, to watch her try to explain away the inexcusable. But I forced myself to stay calm. This meeting wasn't about justice. It was about understanding. "Rachel," I said slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about our friendship lately, about how long we've known each other, how much we've been through together. Do you ever feel like things have changed between us?" She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Changed how?" "I don't know. Just different, like we're not as close as we used to be." For a moment, something real flickered across her face, something painful and raw and ugly. Then it was gone, replaced by that practiced smile. "Friendships evolve, Soph. People grow in different directions. It doesn't mean anything's wrong." I looked at her across the table. This woman I had known for more than 20 years, and I realized I had never really known her at all. The Rachel I thought I loved, the best friend who believed in me and supported me and wanted me to succeed, had never existed. She was a projection of what I wanted to see, a fantasy I had created to justify my loyalty to someone who had never deserved it. The real Rachel was sitting in front of me, lying to my face with a smile, knowing full well that she had been methodically working to destroy everything I cared about. I finished my lunch, keeping the conversation light and meaningless, and hugged her goodbye at the door. She told me we should do this more often. I told her I agreed. Then I went home and told Daniel it was time to act. Working with Marcus and our legal team, I built a case against Rachel and the PR consultancy she had hired. We gathered every piece of evidence, the traced emails, the fraudulent complaints, the fake social media accounts, the financial records showing payments from her account to the consultancy. We documented the specific harm each action had caused, the lost clients, the failed deals, the damage to my professional reputation. And we calculated the financial impact of her campaign, totaling everything we could prove into a number that made my stomach turn. But I didn't want to just sue her. I didn't want a private settlement where she paid some money and agreed to stop, only to find subtler ways to attack me in the future. I wanted her to face real consequences, the kind she couldn't buy her way out of, the kind that would follow her for the rest of her life. I wanted everyone to know what she had done and what kind of person she really was. Marcus introduced me to a journalist he knew, a woman named Victoria, who specialized in investigative pieces about fraud and corporate misconduct. I was hesitant at first, worried about the attention and the scrutiny that going public would bring. But Victoria assured me that she would handle the story fairly, that she would verify every claim and give Rachel every opportunity to respond. And she pointed out something I hadn't considered. By telling my story, I might help other victims of similar campaigns come forward. Victoria spent 2 months investigating. She interviewed former employees of the PR consultancy who revealed that Rachel's was just one of many reputation destruction campaigns they had run for wealthy clients who wanted to take down rivals and enemies without getting their own hands dirty. She obtained financial records that showed Rachel had spent over £50,000 on the effort to destroy me, money that her parents had given her for what she claimed was a business investment. She tracked down other people Rachel had targeted over the years, smaller-scale victims who had never connected the dots or never had the resources to fight back. The day Victoria's article was published, I woke up to my phone buzzing with notifications. The headline was brutal. Socialite spent £50,000 on secret campaign to destroy childhood friend's business. The story laid out everything in meticulous detail: the jealousy, the lies, the hired consultancy, the forged complaints, the fake accounts, the systematic effort to assassinate my character. It quoted former employees of the PR firm describing Rachel as demanding and cruel, pushing them to escalate their attacks whenever a particular lie didn't seem to be gaining traction. It included a statement from Rachel's lawyers denying everything, but the evidence was so overwhelming that the denial read as desperate rather than convincing. The reaction was swift and overwhelming. Rachel's name trended on social media as people shared their outrage at her behavior. Journalists started digging into her background, unearthing other instances of entitled cruelty and casual meanness toward service workers and subordinates. Her parents released a statement expressing shock and disappointment, claiming they had no idea what their daughter had been doing with the money they gave her. Friends and acquaintances came forward to share their own stories of being on the receiving end of Rachel's manipulation. But what surprised me most was the outpouring of support for me and for BrightPath. Clients who had been scared off by Rachel's lies reached out to apologize and ask if we could resume working together. Investors who had been warned away expressed interest in learning more about the company. The industry rallied around me, holding up my story as an example of resilience and integrity in the face of malicious attacks. Within a month of the article's publication, BrightPath had signed more new clients than we had in the entire previous year. And then came the legal consequences. Armed with Victoria's reporting and our own evidence, we filed a civil lawsuit against Rachel and the PR consultancy for defamation, tortious interference with business relationships, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The case was devastating, not because Rachel contested it, but because she didn't. Her lawyers advised her that going to trial would only expose more embarrassing details, that the evidence against her was insurmountable, and that her best option was to settle quickly and quietly. She didn't get quiet. The settlement required her to pay a substantial sum in damages, but more importantly, it required her to make a public apology. I insisted on that term over the objections of my own lawyers, who thought it was unnecessary and potentially inflammatory. But I needed her to acknowledge what she had done. I needed the world to hear her admit that she had lied, manipulated, and deliberately tried to destroy someone who had done nothing to her except succeed where she had failed. The day Rachel made her public apology was surreal. She stood in front of cameras, looking smaller and older than I had ever seen her, and read from a prepared statement acknowledging her role in the campaign against me. She expressed regret for the harm she had caused and stated that her actions were motivated by personal jealousy rather than any genuine concern about my business. Her voice trembled as she spoke, and I could see tears gathering in her eyes. Part of me, the part that still remembered the girl who had defended me from bullies, felt a stab of pity. But then I remembered all the nights I had lain awake, wondering why my business was struggling, all the clients who had looked at me with suspicion, all the work I had done to build something I could be proud of, only to have it nearly destroyed by someone I trusted completely. And the pity faded, replaced by a cold satisfaction that felt like justice. After the settlement, Rachel's life fell apart in ways I hadn't anticipated. Her parents, humiliated by the scandal, cut off her allowance and insisted she take responsibility for her own life for the first time ever. The social circles she had cultivated for years closed their doors to her, unwilling to be associated with someone who had become a symbol of privileged cruelty and petty jealousy. She lost her flat, her memberships, her invitations to parties and events. The last I heard, she had moved to a small town in Wales to live with a distant aunt, her name now a cautionary tale rather than a ticket to the good life. I wish I could say I felt nothing but triumph. I wish I could say I had moved on completely and never thought about her at all. But the truth is more complicated. Even now, years later, I sometimes find myself wondering what might have happened if things had been different. If Rachel had been capable of celebrating my success instead of resenting it. If she had channeled her energy into building something of her own instead of tearing me down. If the friendship I thought we had could have been real. But I've learned to accept that some people are simply not capable of genuine love or support. Some people see the world as a zero-sum game where someone else's success is automatically their failure. And some people, no matter how much you care about them, will never be able to see you as anything other than competition to be destroyed. What I know for certain is that I survived. Not just survived, but thrived. BrightPath is now one of the most respected digital marketing firms in the country. We've expanded to offices in 3 cities, employ over 50 people, and work with clients I once only dreamed about. Daniel and I welcomed our first child last year, a daughter named Lily, and I'm determined to teach her the lessons I learned from this experience. To choose her friends carefully, to trust her instincts when something feels wrong, to never let anyone make her feel small for daring to dream big, and to understand that sometimes the people closest to us are the ones capable of causing the most harm. Looking back on everything now, I realize that Rachel's betrayal, as painful as it was, ultimately made me stronger. It forced me to examine my relationships more critically, to value myself more highly, and to build a support system of people who genuinely want to see me succeed. It taught me that loyalty should be earned, not given automatically, and that someone's presence in your past doesn't entitle them to a place in your future. Do I forgive Rachel? I'm not sure if forgiveness is the right word. I understand her in a way I never did when we were friends. I understand that her resentment was born from insecurity, that her attacks were a desperate attempt to restore the imbalance she thought should exist between us, the struggling scholarship kid and the privileged socialite. But understanding isn't the same as forgiveness, and some actions are simply too damaging to be absolved by insight alone. What I have found is something better than forgiveness: freedom. Freedom from the guilt of wondering if I could have done something differently. Freedom from the hope that she might someday change. Freedom from the weight of a friendship that was built on a foundation of lies. Rachel is no longer my best friend, my confidant, my sister by choice. She is simply a chapter in my story, a cautionary tale I tell myself when I'm tempted to ignore the warning signs I should have seen years ago. The night I won my second Entrepreneur of the Year award, 2 years after everything had settled, I stood on that stage and looked out at a room full of people who believed in me, respected me, and wanted to celebrate my success. And I realized I wasn't searching for Rachel's face anymore. I wasn't wondering what she was thinking, how she was reacting, whether she was finally proud of me. I had stopped needing her approval a long time ago. I gave my speech, thanked my team and my investors and my husband, and accepted my trophy with a smile that came from somewhere deep inside me. Then I went home to Daniel and Lily, to the life I had built through my own hard work and determination, to the future I had earned despite everyone and everything that had tried to hold me back. And in that moment, I understood something that had taken me years to learn. The best revenge isn't destruction. It isn't watching your enemy suffer or reveling in their downfall. The best revenge is living a life so full, so successful, so genuinely happy that the person who tried to destroy you becomes nothing more than a distant memory, a story you tell at dinner parties, a lesson you carry with you into a future they can never touch. Rachel Bennett tried to destroy me because she couldn't stand to watch me succeed. And in the end, her betrayal became the catalyst for the greatest success of my life. Not just the awards or the money or the recognition, though those things matter, but the strength I found in myself when I was tested, the clarity I gained about who truly deserves my trust, the freedom I claimed when I finally let go of a friendship that had been poisoning me for years. I built my company on the idea that everyone deserves access to the tools they need to succeed. Now I know that's not just a business philosophy, it's a personal conviction. Everyone deserves the chance to build something meaningful, regardless of where they come from or who tries to hold them back. And no one, not even the person who was once your closest friend, has the right to take that chance away from you. My school friend became my enemy after I succeeded, but I became something more important in the end. I became the person she was always afraid I could be, and that, more than any award or settlement or public vindication, is the victory that matters most. Sometimes late at night, when the house is quiet and Lily is asleep in her crib, I think about the girl I used to be, the scrawny kid with the second-hand uniform and the impossible dreams. She was so hungry for acceptance, so desperate for someone to believe in her, that she would have accepted anything that looked like friendship. She would have excused any behavior, overlooked any warning sign, just to feel like she belonged somewhere. I want to reach back through time and tell that girl she didn't need to settle. I want to tell her that the friends who truly love you don't make you feel small for wanting more. They don't undermine your confidence or dismiss your ambitions or feel threatened by your success. They lift you up, cheer you on, and celebrate every milestone as if it were their own. And they would never, ever stand in the shadows and try to destroy everything you've built because they couldn't bear to watch you shine. But I can't reach that girl. All I can do is make sure Lily never has to learn these lessons the hard way. All I can do is build a life that proves the doubters wrong and teach the people who matter that ambition is something to be celebrated, not feared. All I can do is keep going, keep building, keep succeeding in spite of everyone who ever told me I couldn't. That's what I'm doing now. Not for revenge, not for vindication, not to prove anything to Rachel or anyone else, but for myself, because I deserve to live the life I've worked so hard to create, because my dreams matter, my success matters, my happiness matters, and because the best way to honor everything I've been through is to keep becoming the person I was always meant to be. My name is Sophie Mitchell. My best friend from school tried to destroy my life because she couldn't handle my success. And despite everything she did, despite all the lies and the manipulation and the calculated cruelty, I'm still standing. I'm still thriving. I'm still here. And I'm only just getting started.